Welcome, believers. Welcome, conspiracy theorists. Welcome to the wonderfully weird world of the Tinfoil Hat Fan Club, where we talk about all the batshit crazy stuff that goes on in the world, and there's loads. Now, I'm going live on the 24th of May at 9 o'clock in the evening. Stay tuned if you can. That would be fantastic. Now, I'm going to talk about alien abductions, but it's only going to be a void filler. What I really want to talk about is your experiences. Have you seen anything weird? Have you seen anything wonderful? You know, if you have, tell me about it. It'll be fantastic, right? Now, we are believers in conspiracy theories, right? We check under the bed, don't we? We check all narratives. We look through those curtains. We question everything, right? And so we should, right? But I'm going to talk about something that might push your comfort zone or at least make you question our origins, all right? Today, we are going to talk about the biggest, baddest base out there, the biggest, baddest alien base, the moon, right? Is it an alien base? But before we go into that, I'd like to tell you some history of it, if I may. Right, so throughout human history, the moon has been a constant and captivating presence in the night sky. A sight so familiar that you kind of take it for granted, don't you? But could there have been a time in Earth's distant past when the moon didn't exist? You know, if that is true, how and when did it appear, and what or who was responsible for its arrival? Right, a question we have to ask ourselves at least once or twice in our lifetime, eh? Right? Could there really have been an era before the moon? A time perhaps witnessed by now lost civilizations when our celestial neighbour was absent from the sky. Now, we all know science and our understanding of the universe suggests that life as we know it would be impossible without the moon. Yet ancient stories and legends but suggest that there was a time when the moon wasn't there, okay? So, right, indeed, we have looked before at the moon and its mysterious past, as well as many conspiracy theories associated with it. There is, though, perhaps none more outlandish that there was a time in human history when the moon wasn't present in our skies. Now, we know, as I say, that the moon makes life on Earth possible, and without it, the planet would be drastically different. Okay, however, given that some life could exist on Earth without the moon, could humans have existed during a time when the moon wasn't present? Indeed, if there were any truth to such claims of a time without the moon, it would force us to reevaluate not only our history, but our understanding of almost everything around us. And I love that, mate. We should always reevaluate our history, always. We are a species in amnesia. We are not being told the truth, all right? Now, would you believe some of the most well-known ancient accounts suggest a time when the moon was absent from Earth's skies? Even Aristotle, in recounting the history of the Arcadian region in Greece, right? Aristotle refers to the Pelasgians, a people who he wrote had lived there since very old times, right? And he's written down this during an era when the moon did not exist. What do you think he meant by that? Right? Another ancient Greek philosopher, Apollonios, who also spoke of a time before the moon when not all celestial objects were present in the sky, and the only people who existed were the Pelasgians residing in the mountains of Arcadia, right? So he speaks of a time when there was people when not all celestial objects were present in the sky. Is he referring to the moon? Right? Now, this raises an intriguing question about the mysterious Pelasgians who were there, right? How were they able to survive without the moon? If they did indeed exist, might they have not have been entirely human? It's just a question, isn't it, right? After all, our current understanding of life does suggest that it would be impossible to live here without the moon. So how did the Pelasgians manage it? All right, just a question, isn't it? Just how far back in time did these Pelasgians live? Likely more further than more tens of thousands of years, possibly even hundreds of thousands or even millions of years ago. Because, you know, we are a species in amnesia. We don't understand our history. Plutarch, for instance, describes a time before the birth of Zeus when the Arcadians possessed their land. noting that these folks are older than the moon. Older than the moon. What does he mean by that? Other ancient writings and references this period, right? Lucanio, if I'm pronouncing that right, he was born in Syria in 125 AD, right? And his work, Astrology, mentions that the Arcadians foolishly claim they are older than the moon. But he was a novelist and a satirist, right? But Hippolytus records that Arcadia brought forth Perlius Geos. Now, the ancestor of the Perlius Geans, who is of greater antiquity than the moon. Now, he was a bishop of Rome and one of the most important Christian theologians out there. Now, he was born in 170 AD. Even ancient biblical scriptures hint at a time before the moon in the book of Job. It is written that the Lord makes peace in the heights during a period before there was a moon and it did not shine. Similarly, in Psalms, there's a mention of a time. It says, since the time of the sun and before the time of the moon, an area described as a generation of generation ago, so distant it almost beyond measure. Okay, these references are not confined to just ancient Greece, Rome, or the Bible. They appear in cultures around the world. I mean, for example, right? For example, the oral traditions of the Columbian civilizations in the Bogota Highlands speak of the earliest time when the moon was not yet in the heavens. What do you think they mean by that, right? The giants of ancient legends. Now, looking beyond these regions, Zulu legends from Africa also speak of a time before the moon, claiming it was brought to Earth many thousands of years ago by two extraterrestrial brothers named Wine and Ampunka, right? These details, particularly the mention of the two alien brothers, become even more intriguing when considering the possibility that the Perliagians were not entirely human, like we mentioned earlier. So if these Perlius Geans were not entirely human, maybe these two alien brothers had a connection with them. I know that's mad. I know it's mad, but we are going on hypothesis here, aren't we, right? The story bears a striking resemblance to the legend of the Inuki from ancient Sumer, which tells of two brothers, Enlil and Inki, who descended from the heavens to rule over the earth. Now, many people believe these legends described an extraterrestrial race arriving on Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago. And I do believe that, I think. I'm going to buy that, right? Perhaps more intriguing are the ancient writings and symbols found on the courtyard of Carliasia in Bolivia, a site constructed at least 15,000 years ago. These records claim that the moon we see today was brought to Earth thousands of years ago, replacing a previous smaller moon that had been orbiting the planet at the time. So this idea is fascinating because it suggests an intelligent operation behind the moon's arrival and might explain how life existed before the current moon appeared, right? Because the earlier moon provided enough stabilisation for life to persist, right? It's possible that the arrival of the new moon triggered such cataclysmic events that they led to the mentioned Bible stories, you know, like Noah's flood, the Hindu flood, and you know and the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? So floods isn't just one Hebrew Noah story. The Hindus have a flood story. You know, everyone has a flood story. So maybe the arrival of this new moon would have caused such cataclysmic events. You don't know. Makes sense though, doesn't it? Right? Makes sense. But one of the most frustrating challenges for historians, right, and researchers studying the great civilization of the Americas is the extent to which the Spanish conquistadors destroyed their official histories and writings during the colonization of the Americas. Now, this sad loss of records leads us only to speculate on what they might have revealed. So when the Spanish invaded the Americas, they destroyed all history and records. It was all lost, right? So what got lost when the Spanish did invade the Americas? Probably a lot, right? We know that our moon is indeed an anomaly, all right, particularly in terms of how it was formed or arrived in Earth's orbit. Much of which we claim to know about is largely speculative. Of course it is, right? Because no one was around at the time, was they? Right? Despite being educated and well considered, these theories may not be more credible than the ancient creation stories and legends that speak of a time before the moon. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? Because theories are just theories, but recorded records are just that. They're recorded, right? That makes you think, doesn't it? Right? These ancient accounts might deserve more serious consideration than they currently receive, don't you think? Right? Now, it's also important to remember that in ancient times, writing was not a widespread activity as it is today. The act of recording information was costly, whether it involved stone, clay, parchment, or paper. As a result, writing was reserved for a select few and often for specific significant purposes. All right, you wasn't allowed to write your shopping list. All right, it was for very significant purposes. Now we know, for instance, that the record keepers of ancient Rome employed a rigorous fact check and process before anything was officially documented and preserved. So it is reasonable to assume that many other ancient civilizations adhered to similar practices. And we can assume that because it was expensive, right? And you imagine trying to store, stone tablets. I mean, they would take up a lot of room on the shelf, wouldn't they? So you weren't allowed to just write anything, right? So, with that in mind, could it be that there was indeed a time when a civilization existed on Earth without a moon? Or with a different one from what we now oversee? And could this civilization have even played a role in bringing it to our current orbit, perhaps to ensure that human life could thrive? It is possible that the civilization was the ancestors of the gods described in ancient myths. And if so, where did this civilization originate from? So, ancient myths, do you think they're just myths? Or were they really stories told by genuine witnesses? Now, this ancient civilization, were they native to Earth? Or, as many legends and creation stories suggest, did they come from the heavens? Ultimately, from another part of the universe. I love it. I love it. Now, look, ancient myth, I'm going to waffle on about that a bit, right? Ancient myths, I believe they genuinely were there. Now, the gods, Zeus, that's all I can think of off the top of my head, you know what I'm saying, right? Greek gods, do you think there were aliens? I mean, obviously the Greek people looked at them as God, but they could have been aliens, couldn't they? They could have really been knocking around at the time. Now, as strange as it might seem to some, could an extraterrestrial civilization have landed on Earth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years ago, when there was no moon in the sky? And could these alien visitors have been responsible for shaping the world as we know it today, including the development of human civilization? All right, could they have stuck that moon up there to keep an eye on us? So the reason I'm telling you this story, and I am going to buy it. I am going to buy it. Because as I say, all we've got is theories, but you've got genuine recorded information there, right? So, but the reason I'm telling you this story is next week we are going to talk about the biggest, baddest alien base out there, the moon, right? And the theory that it may be hollow, all right? And I love that. All right, so I want to devote a whole episode to it. So look, thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you could like, subscribe and ding that notification bell, it would be fantastic. Check out my YouTube channel if you can and like them. Apparently it's really important. That would be great. That would be great. And I will catch you on the next one. But remember, the 24th of May, 9 o'clock, we're going to go live. Please, just get involved. Tell me about your sightings. Have you seen a UFO? Was it a light in the sky? Was it a weird feeling? Have you seen anything more like, did you see a landed craft? Did you see one? I mean, all your stories will be fantastic. So please tune in if you can, and I will catch you next week. Thanks very much.